King Charles reportedly blocked Keir Starmer from Buckingham Palace following a heated confrontation that left aides stunned and whispers echoing through Westminster. Starmer, the ever-present figure in photo ops and headlines, was at the palace on what many assumed was a diplomatic visit. But behind the gold-trimmed doors, the mood shifted when the fallout from Channel 4's explosive documentary on child abuse entered the conversation. As the country reeled from a scandal exposing years of systemic failures and cover-ups, Starmer's presence at the palace wasn't to show solidarity with victims or discuss reforms. It was, according to insiders, a tone-deaf engagement at a time when the public demanded accountability. What unfolded next shocked even those closest to the monarchy. Sources claim King Charles, typically composed and careful with words, was visibly angered by Starmer's dismissive attitude toward the documentary's findings. The former Director of Public Prosecutions, who led the Crown Prosecution Service during many of the years the abuse cases were mishandled, offered no strong condemnation. Instead, he was accused of shifting blame and downplaying the severity of what had been revealed. When he fumbled to respond, the king reportedly snapped, asking him pointedly, "How dare you downplay this?" Eyewitnesses described raised voices and a tense atmosphere that culminated in Starmer being asked to leave, not with force, but with unambiguous insistence. His presence, the king made clear, was no longer welcome. For a royal known to avoid public political stances, this reaction was seismic. It wasn't a disagreement over policy or party lines, it was fury over a moral failure. The kind of failure that sees thousands of vulnerable girls silenced, overlooked, and discarded by the very institutions meant to protect them. And through it all, Starmer, who once sat atop the prosecution hierarchy, offered little more than vague deflections. His office responded with a statement that the findings were not new. Not new. Try telling that to the survivors who finally saw their trauma recognized. Try telling it to the grieving parents who begged for justice and were ignored. Try telling it to a public who watched, sickened, as former officials confessed on national television that they had chosen to look away. Even the king, who rarely engages in political drama, couldn't stomach the silence. When Starmer left the palace, pale-faced and tight-lipped, word of the confrontation spread like wildfire. This wasn't just about law enforcement. It was about a deep cultural rot. Starmer's refusal to offer a forceful response wasn't a misstep, it was a reflection of the very inertia that let this crisis fester for years. Because this isn't new. Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, the list of towns where abuse went unchecked is long and devastating. And during many of those years, Starmer's CPS had the authority to act, to investigate, to prosecute. Instead, reports were buried, voices silenced, and institutional cowardice reigned. And now, as a national broadcaster finally steps up to shine a harsh spotlight on this nightmare, Starmer still can't bring himself to acknowledge it with the gravity it deserves. Yet he found the time to praise a fictional Netflix drama about abuse, calling it powerful, important, worthy of national attention. Real survivors, however, didn't get that level of moral clarity. Real testimonies didn't get the red carpet. Real trauma didn't get his voice. King Charles has reportedly blocked Keir Starmer from returning to Buckingham Palace after a heated confrontation over Channel 4's shocking documentary on grooming scandals. Sources say the usually reserved king was furious at Starmer's dismissive tone, accusing him of ignoring years of systemic abuse while serving as Director of Public Prosecutions. Eyewitnesses described raised voices and Starmer being firmly asked to leave. While Starmer praised fictional Netflix dramas about abuse, he remained silent on real survivors' pain. This rare royal rebuke has rocked Westminster, exposing deep frustrations over political inaction, and raising serious questions about leadership, accountability, and moral responsibility. What we're seeing is selective outrage. Moral posturing for the cameras when it's safe, silence when it's real. One standard for scripted performances, another for brutal truths. And in the quiet aftermath of his palace departure, that double standard is impossible to ignore.